In today's video, we're going to be discussing bunker play. What we're talking about on this video is how to play from hard, wet, compact sand. Make sure you check this video out for more info. Welcome back to the TruGolf Academy. You've joined me, Jon Watts, today at Branston Golf and Country Club. I'm in the bunker, as you can see, and I haven't raked this bunker for a very good reason. And normally Branston's bunkers wouldn't be displayed this way, but we've had a couple of days of real heavy rain, which actually closed the course. And what you're seeing here is a bunker that is sort of washed out here. There's a lot of lines. There are some animal footprints and bits through it, but you can see some quite dark sand, very heavy, very compact sand, all washed away. No sort of fluffy stuff on the top, so it hasn't been raked, deep raked yet. It needs to be, and the greenkeepers will go on top of that. But it gave me a really good chance and advantage to talk about what to do when you're out that wet sand, because there are going to be times where it's rained heavy overnight, you're up early, or it's raining during the competition and you're facing this lie and it hasn't had that deep rake. It hasn't been looked after by the green stuff as they would like, and you end up with this bare wet sand. How do you play it? What keys can you take to it? So I'm hitting here around a 15-20 yard bunker shot. The distance isn't particularly relevant, but I'm going to be going towards that flag there. And there's a couple of things I would change. If I had more than one option in terms of club choice, I would take my club with more loft but with less bounce. So generally that's going to be your lob wedge. If you carry a sand wedge and a lob wedge, so sand wedge generally around a 56-ish degree, they generally have a slightly wider sole, they generally have a little bit more bounce. And all that bounce is, and I won't get into it too deeply, is that the lowest point of the golf club isn't the leading edge. If you actually hold the club up so you're looking at the sole of it, you'll see your low point of the wedge is actually either more in the middle or towards the back of the sole. It's definitely not the leading edge. And that angle is what we call the bounce there. So mine here is a 58-degree golf club and it has 10 degrees of bounce. If you have a couple of options, if you carry a 56 and a 60, I would encourage you, if you haven't already bought them, to buy a higher bounce 56 and a lower bounce lob wedge. If you've got them in the bag, hopefully they're already that way round. I do think it's a bit of a waste when I see two clubs. So I see golfers carrying two clubs there, a sand and a lob wedge with the same bounce angle. We would want less bounce, so the trailing edge there isn't as low or doesn't sit as low when there's less bounce, so the club is flatter, if you like, to the floor. And that encourages the club to dig more, whereas when there's more bounce, it's encouraging it to glide or skim. When it is hard, compact, wet sand, you do not want it to skim. If I create a lot of bounce or use a club with a lot of bounce here, we're going to get the club hitting the sand and bouncing off like it would do if we're hitting hard, firm turf around the green from chipping or pitching. So point number two is we don't want to open the face, because if I do open my club face here, I'm exposing more bounce. I'm getting the trailing edge to sit even lower than the leading edge. So now this leading edge is way up in the floor and I'm more likely to top thin or scull that golf ball. So we want to play a club with less bounce. We want to play that club face squarer because we're trying to get the club to dig a little bit more. We don't want it to hit the sand and bounce off the top. What are the differences? Well, if I had lots of fluffy sand here, when I hit the sand, you would see a lot of sand being displaced. You would see a big divot effectively. I would take a lot of sand. But because the sand is compact, it's pushed down, the water has sat there, it's pushed the sand down, it's compacted it. When I hit it, actually we get less sand. We almost get a shallower divot. So what does that do to the golf club? Well, it doesn't slow it down as much. Normally when I'm hitting the sand, if there's a lot of sand there, the club is slowed. When the club is slowing down because the amount of sand it's got to go through, we get less energy going through to the golf ball, i.e. less distance. Because there is going to be less of a divot here, I'm going to actually pass on more energy, more speed to the golf ball. This ball's going to go a little bit further. So I could shorten my swing or slow down the movement a little bit, by all means to change that. All I'm going to really be doing is playing that club face pretty square and not hitting it as hard is my thought process. So If I'm trying to hit a 20-yard bunker shot in my head, I'm feeling like I'm hitting more like a 10-yard bunker shot. So I'm not going to need as much speed or as long a swing. That changing the swing length, if you're capable of doing it, is a good way to do it, because of course what we don't want to see is long back and then slowing down. We still need an acceleration, but I don't want you to accelerate as hard as you would do for a normal 20-yard bunker shot, because you're going to take less sand. You're not going to be creating as big a divot there. The club doesn't get slowed down, more energy passed onto the golf ball. Because we're not going to be actually displacing as much sand, because the divot effectively out of the sand isn't going to be as large, the strike normally comes a little bit lower out of the golf club. Normally it would be a touch higher in the face. It just means it's all going to be lowering my ball flight. But normally if we can strike this okay, still aim for around that 2 inches, we will create a lot of spin. So we'll tend to see a slightly lower flight, but if we strike it well enough, we'd still expect to see a lot of spin on that second bounce. These are the ones that can be quite impressive when you're hitting out wet sand. They go in a bit lower, but they check up perhaps on that second bounce of the green, as long as the strike point is okay. Now with all bunker shots, and I'm not going to go into it too deeply, with all bunker shots, I'd like the ball to be positioned forwards, and I'd like to always aim for a couple of inches. So I want to make sure that my sternum feels like it's either over the golf ball or over my contact point, setting my pressure onto my lead leg, my one closest to the target. Golfers who strike too far back, which is often the case, are golfers that haven't applied enough pressure towards their lead leg. That might be at setup, or it might be that during the movement they're actually leaning backwards. So we've got to make sure we get decent contact point by setting that pressure onto our lead leg. So my change is here. I'd use a low bounce golf club if I've got the option, a bit of loft if I can, if it's a short shot. Obviously if I've got a longer distance, I can use a lower lofted golf club. I'm going to keep the setup the same. Ball position forwards, pressure forwards, aiming for a couple of inches. I'm not going to open the club face. I'm going to keep it very square, and I'm not going to hit it as hard as I would do normally for a 20-yard bunker shot. So I may just feel that it's a slightly shorter backswing to help me take that speed off of it. Normally I'm swinging a good way up to shoulder height. I may feel in my head that it's a little bit closer to hip. Let's give it a whirl. Exactly as I said there, shallow divot. I struck, because I drew a line there, it was at the golf ball. I struck around 2 inches, maybe 3 inches behind the golf ball. Very shallow divot. I wasn't trying to, it's just the sand is very compact there. The ball came out a little bit lower, really checked up on that second bounce, and you can see it skidded to a halt pretty close to the flag. If you just try actually in a practice bunker, hitting the sand, you will just see what I mean, that you won't take as much sand. That club won't dig as much. It'll skim a little bit more, bounce a little bit more off the surface. The divot will be shallower. That's meaning there's more energy past the golf ball, hence not having to hit it as hard. Now, that's all well and good as long as we can allow that ball to go in a little bit lower. If you really need to hit the higher shot from a hard, wet sand bunker, there is only really one option, and it is a higher risk shot, so it's not something I would suggest playing unless you've practiced, but I'm just going to quickly mention it. And I have talked about this before, and it was a method I actually pinched. I'm name dropping here off Justin Rose, and it was something he said that he just played around in the bunker. He just had a bit of fun and found out what worked for him from different lies. So he found from bare lies, which is like this hard compact sand, how he'd like to play it when he wanted more height was to open the face, but lower the handle and feel like it's just the heel of the golf club that's digging into the sand. So rather than using the whole sole of the golf club that's going to bounce, he's trying to use just a sharper point of the golf club, the heel. So lowering the hands, which helps stick the toe up in the air anyway. The club face is open, so I'm going to be able to create more height, but it's that feeling that I'm actually just digging the heel in. Now you will see here that I'm actually able to create a slightly deeper divot into the sand because I'm not getting the whole width of the sand wedge, the lob wedge digging into the sand. I'm just trying to get that heel. So it's the only way I can find. I may not get it all the way back to this flag, but create height from a bare or wet lie. So I'm opening the face before I grip it, I'm lowering my hands, and I'm going to feel like I dig the heel in 2 inches behind the golf ball rather than the whole wedge. So you can see I created, I know it didn't get very far, I'd have to generate a lot more speed, but what I was demonstrating there was a really high, soft landing shot and actually a much deeper divot. This divot is pointing a little bit more to the left because I'm almost chopping that heel of the golf club into the sand. You can see when I do that, I can create a much deeper impact of the sand there, so I can get that ball higher in the face, I can get a higher launch angle. So if we need that extra height from a bare wet lie, open the face, but try and just dig a part of the golf club in, the heel of the golf club, by lowering the hands and feeling like it's a choppy swing, digging the heel in. It is a higher risk shot, and I'd only take that one on if you've practiced it. The bog standard one is use low bounce, play that club face square, still aim for a couple of inches, and don't hit it as hard when it's hard wet sand, because that ball will come out lower with a little bit more energy on it. If that video has helped, make sure you hit the thumbs up and do subscribe to my channel. It is for free. There is at least 2 videos a week, all instructional videos that are hopefully going to help your game and get you playing some better golf this season. Cheers guys, we'll see you soon.